Hello and welcome to the second video in a series covering the MB SportsWeb Tryout List feature. In this video we're going to cover some of the things that need to happen to use the system before the tryouts start. Now the Tryout List feature itself is something that can be used by both team webmasters or by central administrators. There are actually functions that both sets of people would want to use. But before the tryouts start, there are some prerequisite things that need to happen, and those things would generally only be accomplished by administrators. So some of those would be including the setup of the team webmasters, creating or setting the organization defaults that the tryout lists are going to use to display the information on the team sites, and setting up a tryout list progressions. So if, for example, your association has Team 1 and Team 2, and the players who get released or cut from the first team will then go on the tryout list for the second team, there is a way to set the tryout progressions within the site and have that happen automatically, so that when the coach or manager marks a player as released from their tryout list, it would then show up on the next one automatically. We'll then go through some of the initial setup where players can be added individually, and we'll also show how to import those players from Excel. We will review the team level list display settings, which will be inherited from the organization default list settings, but each team will have the ability to override them if they so choose and if the association's policy allows them to. And then lastly, once we have the tryout list itself set up, we'll need to ensure that there is a tryout list page added to the team's menu. So again, that's something that the team webmasters can do. It might be something that the administrators do on behalf of the teams. Now, throughout the course of these videos on explaining how all this stuff works, we're going to go through and follow a lot of the default settings and when it comes to the list displays and fairly wide open security settings. At the end of the series, we'll have a video that specifically outlines all of the different security options that are available in terms of showing or hiding player names, password protecting pages, showing or hiding certain pages, things like that. However, as we're going through these videos at the start, we're just going to go through and show some of the core features, not all of the different bells and whistles that are available. So let's jump right into the first demo. Okay, so jumping right into the demo here, we're going to start by looking at a sample of what this tryout list is going to look like by the end of this video. So here we're looking at our demo site on a Atom team with a tryout player list page added to the team's menu, showing the default settings for the tryout list itself. So with that, we're going to jump into some of the prerequisites, which again are going to be something that's done by administrators only. So one of the first things we're going to do is set up the team webmasters, which is done within system administration, view all users, and add users. We have other videos that show how to set up team webmasters, so what I'll focus on for right now is how you want to ensure that you're dealing in the right season. So within the control panel roles, whenever you're dealing with a user, it's going to be a webmaster assigned for a team, but what you want to make sure is that you're dealing with a team in the proper season. And the reason we say this is because there's a lot of associations whose tryouts for the following season happen immediately after the previous season ends. So we have a number of videos that show how to schedule tryouts for a season that's upcoming while the current season is still ongoing. And because of that, if you happen to have a winter season and a spring tryouts, for example, you might be setting up team webmasters who are not in the current season because you're talking about next year's team. So you want to make sure you've got the right season selected when you set up your team webmasters, which is probably going to be the coach, maybe a manager. Once you've got the season, then you just pick the team, add update role, and that assigns them to that team in the next year. So because the tryout lists are managed while tryouts are ongoing by the teams themselves, generally, you want to make sure you've assigned webmasters for those teams in the proper season. So the other thing you're going to do is look at your season defaults, and for whatever season is you're setting the tryout list for, you're going to go to season defaults, expand whatever season it is, and go to tryout lists. This will give us the organization default as well as category specific defaults as well as team settings for the tryout lists. And the leagues do show up as well for house league divisions. Typically, you wouldn't use that for house league, but if you do, those leagues can be set at the bottom there. So what you can set for organization defaults is what shows on the pages that are displayed to the end users, as well as some of the options that help with the setting up of the list themselves. Now in here, what I'll also show right now is this release to IDs. This is tryout progression. So if you've got, for example, this demo site has a representative set of teams followed by a local league set of teams. If there are tryouts for a representative local league, and the players who, for example, are trying out for the Atom team, if they get cut or released, they would then go onto the tryout list for the Atom local league team. You set that trial progression first by going and looking at the IDs of each of your teams, which is in Managed Season, Sub-Season Members 2015-2016. The IDs of each of those teams show up on the page there. So we can see that the ID for the Atom Rep team is 2079 and the ID for the Atom Locally team is 2089, which means that when I go back to the season defaults and tryout lists, I want to set the release to IDs of the Atom Rep team to be 2089. And what that means is when a player is marked as released from the Atom Rep, they will then automatically show up on the Atom locally list. So not all associations do tryout progressions, but those who do, this is a fairly nice feature, so you can have players that just automatically, as a release, flow through the system. So the next thing we're going to talk about on the initial setup is something that can be happening both by team level coaches or managers, as well as perhaps even administrators doing this on behalf of the coaches. And this is basically adding players to the list. So within the Manage Site Content module, we're going to go to an individual team. So again, depending on what is the current season and which tryouts we're looking at, team webmasters will be explicitly assigned to the correct team. If you're an administrator doing this on behalf of the teams, then what you'll need to do is make yourself a team webmaster for teams in a future season if it's not yet marked as the current season. If you have any questions on that, please feel free to send us an email or support ticket or give us a call, and we'll make sure that you're set up properly for that if you're an administrator. But the coaches, they should be set up properly and they'll have access to their own team. So within Manage Site Content, for a specific team, we have this tryout list option. And within there, there's two pages, one called View Manage List and the other one called List Settings. So we'll start with View/Manage List, and by default, there won't be any players added to a tryout list. I'll also point out that there are on-screen instructions on here saying that this tryout list has not been added to the team's menu. So we'll cover that also in this video, but just want to point out that that message does exist, just as a reminder that if you haven't yet added the tryout list to your team's menu, then nobody will be able to see it. You'll have the players in the system, but you won't be able to communicate the message out to anybody because they won't be able to get to that list. So first we're going to talk about adding players individually. So if we need to add a player to the list, it might just be easy to do it this way for all your players. If you don't already have your players in Excel, then add player. This will then give you all of the options that are available for each player. So we have groups, which could be used for really any purposes. Some associations use that to provide internal communications. It was originally designed to say, well, there's group 1, group 2, group 3, and we'll have group 1s on the ice or on the field at 1 o'clock, and group 2s on at 3 o'clock, and group 3s on at 5 o'clock. You could use that group to actually tell people when they show up to a specific trial session if you've got different groups. The jersey number and color, we had pre-selected some default colors for the association, but each team can draw it in wherever they want. They can make jersey number to green if they really wanted to. And positions, again, there can be organization defaults that were set up on that list settings page for the organization. But if a player, in this case, if they want to be both a forward or a defense, then you can type whatever you want in there, but you can also pre-select the ones that are available. First name and last name, and then the status. So there's 3 statuses to choose from. Selected means they've made the team, released means they've not made the team, or pending. So obviously, as we're adding new players, they'll be pending. You can put in the email address if you like. There's no reason to. The system doesn't use it for anything. It's just more for your own benefit. And also a code, and the code will be created automatically if you don't provide one. This code must be a number. We'll go over in detail during the last video in the series talking about security and different ways of viewing the lists to show the different ways that that code could be utilized. For now, I'll just leave it blank. I'll hit insert, and it adds the code for me automatically based on an ID of the player that gets created. So it shows on this page too, the columns that are highlighted will be visible to the public. So as it says, if you don't want these columns to show, we'll look at those in the list settings, and we'll talk about that in a few minutes. So if you want to keep adding more players, you have the ability to do that. Just keep on clicking the Add Player button, and away it goes. And if you make a mistake, you can always double click on a player and make changes to their names or anything else that's on here. In addition, later on, this will be how you can also select their different status. But if you also happen to have your players in Excel, then there's the ability to import players. So under bulk options, there's this import players page, and that takes us to this bulk import player page, which gives us a sample of what the Excel file needs to look like before you import it. So it can have additional columns in the Excel file, that's fine, but it does need to have at least these columns in it, and they have to match the heading names exactly. The only thing, the columns must exist, but the only rows which need to have information in them would be the first and last name. So normally you'd have more than just that available, but if all you have is a first and last name, that's fine. But again, you do need to make sure that these columns do exist in the spreadsheet. So I do have a spreadsheet sample ready to go. I'll just bring it over to the other screen here and just to give you an idea of what it looks like. So we have group, code, number, color, first, last, position, and email. So again, the columns need to exist. So this code column, even if there's nothing in it, the column still needs to be there. So we're going to choose the file here and import it. And it should say that we've got 24 players that have now been added to the list. Now, in addition, what the system will do is it will look for the same first and last name for a player in the tryout list already. And if there is one that it matches, then it would actually do an update rather than adding the player twice. So if you're building your list up over a period of time, you can actually just keep on re-importing that same list, and it's not going to duplicate them as long as you haven't changed the name. So once we're done with the import page, we can click Manage Tryout List, or we can click on View Manage List. Both go to the same page. And now we have a whole bunch of different players that are available. Now at this point, if I were to click View Live, it will then tell me that this list is currently being updated. And what we do is we automatically will hide the list itself for a period of 5 minutes after the last change has been made. And since we just made all these changes to the list, it now is hiding for that us automatically. Now, I can see this tryout list because I'm set up as a webmaster for this team or an administrator, so I can see this. But if I were not logged in, because the tryout list is not in this team's menu, I wouldn't be able to see it. So to make sure that the general public will be able to view the tryout list as the tryouts are ongoing, the last thing we have to do is we have to add a tryout list page to the team's menu. So that's done again within the team site. If we go to Site Pages, this is the same place that you would add another page of the team's menu for any purpose, but for the specific purposes of tryouts, we are going to go to Add Page. The page type is going to be a tryout player list. Usually we recommend just dragging this guy down to the bottom so it shows up last in the list, but you can show it wherever you want. You can call it whatever you want as well. By default, it'll be called the tryout player list. And then we just go ahead and insert and close. And now if I go back to my tryout list and view manage list and view it live, again, it won't show up still because adding the list to the menu itself also does update the last updated date. But now you'll see that there's a tryout player list in the team's menu, so now they'll be able to get to it when the time comes. So that's before tryouts start. Again, it's a combination of administrators setting up some of the prerequisites, and then either the administrators or each individual team going into their manage site content to the team, tryout list, view manage list, and adding the players to their list. Lastly, we'll just quickly touch on the list settings. So again, this is the organization defaults will be set by the administrator. I happen to also be an administrator, so I have the ability to change the organization defaults here. If I was just a team level webmaster, then I would see all of these, but I'd only be able to change the one for my own team. So if I wanted to, for example, hide certain columns, if I didn't want or if I did want the first and last name shown, then on an individual team basis, we can update some of these list settings to show or hide certain information. And again, on the View Manage List page, any column that's highlighted will be visible to the public.